What's up, everybody? Jackson Fuller here, and you are listening to somehow the fourth episode of Hoggin the Mic. I'll be joined, as always, by Andrew Hutchinson momentarily to discuss the past week of Arkansas Razorback sports. We're recording this episode on Sunday night, just one day after another disheartening loss by the Arkansas basketball team. For my money, this was the worst loss of the season. Maybe Hutch disagrees, but Saturday absolutely shook me and my expectations for the rest of the year. So we'll maybe have a healthy debate or just agree that we're both kind of broken after a loss to South Carolina this weekend. Thank you so much for continuing to listen as we try to grow this podcast. And without further ado, let's play the music. Let's bring in Hutch, and let's tune in for another episode of Hoggin the Mic. Hutch, how's it going, man? You ready for another winter storm? Have you mentally recovered from the last one and prepared for the next ice storm we're supposed to get later tonight?
When you've got two kids, no, you don't really mentally recover. You just kind of dread it whenever you see that it's coming again. I might have said a few choice four-letter words when I saw that there was going to be an ice storm. Hopefully it won't be as bad as they say it's going to be, and maybe they'll be in school tomorrow, but I'm not holding my breath at this point.
Yeah, this first winter for me here in Northwest Arkansas it was fine until about 2 weeks ago, and now I'm wondering what the heck I'm doing here. But alas, we persevere. The fall was incredible. Can't wait for a spring baseball season. But before we get there, we got to talk basketball. Hutch, last time we spoke, Arkansas was coming off a dramatic win over Texas A&M. And the Aggies have a really talented team this year. And Arkansas looked great for, 30 of the 40 minutes of that game. I think there was optimism that by going back to some original roots with its lineups and rotations, that maybe Arkansas would start a little run in the SEC, but those roots disappeared overnight. Maybe it was the snow. South Carolina came into Bud Walton Arena Saturday afternoon and beat Arkansas 77-64. The Hogs never led and never really felt close in the second half. What were some of your biggest takeaways from the loss, Hutch? Just, surprise? I mean, I guess we can't really be surprised, right? I think you said that last week, but what were your, the key takeaways now after Arkansas's 1-4 in the SEC?
I was a little bit surprised just because it did feel like that was a game they were going to win. I mean, South Carolina is a solid team, much improved from last year. I'll give them that, but not exactly. It wasn't Auburn coming to town or Kentucky like next week. So you're thinking, okay, Arkansas has just beaten Texas A&M, as you said, a talented team. They were able to hang on and win that in dramatic fashion. You're like, okay, maybe they'll carry in some momentum, but it just didn't happen. I mean, it was really never that close, honestly. I mean, I guess maybe for a little bit in the first half, but really they took control and led by double digits pretty much half the game. And so I think my biggest takeaway was like, man, this team, I always joked with a couple of guys, like, saying like, man, it's going to really stink having to cover the NIT this season. I don't even think we're going to be covering that. I don't know if this team's going to make any type of postseason. They may not finish above 500. I think KenPom's projections now have them going 15-16 in the regular season. So I don't know, man. It does not look good, and I'm as discouraged as I've been all season.
Yeah, they're definitely not trending in the right direction. I mean, I think the slow start to SEC play, it was a difficult schedule. If with Auburn coming to town the first game and then having to go play 2 road games against pretty good teams. But I think that's kind of why, for me, this was the worst loss of the season. Yes, the record books will say that a 32-point record-setting home loss to Auburn was statistically a worse result, but Saturday felt like a season ender to me. Like, yes, it's hard to win on the road against Florida, Georgia. Every team is given a stinker, maybe the Auburn game, but you can't combine all those losses and then lose at home to South Carolina. Like you said, a much improved team, but still, if Arkansas wants to make the tournament, they have to win these games. They just have to. They can't lose any more of these winnable home SEC games and make the tournament. I mean, you're talking about the NIT. Maybe they could do that, but I agree. I mean, am I crazy to kind of be taking so much from this loss. I get the sense that maybe you're kind of in the same boat as me, that this one kind of it sent a shiver down our spines maybe for I don't think there is a turnaround coming anytime soon.
I'm right there with you, and I honestly think the rest of the fan base is too. I mean, it felt like there were moments in that game against South Carolina. You know, Tremont Mark had the back-to-back threes, cut the deficit to 7. There with what, like 13, 12 minutes left in the game. It felt like Bud Walton. I mean, it was a pretty good crowd. I mean, despite the poor play of late, you know, they still had a really nice, solid crowd, and it just never happened. I mean, South Carolina immediately responded. I think they went like on a 13-1 run right after that and really put the game away. And so, I mean, it's just like, just based on all the things I've read on social media, based on people I've talked to, friends and family that I've talked to, it just feels like everyone's pretty much kind of closed the door on basketball and is like, all right, let's get to baseball season.
Yeah. A couple things that really stuck out from that game to me. I mean, South Carolina statistically not an elite 3-point shooting team. They shot 50% from three. They're not, they a decent rebounding team, but nothing like Florida or Georgia, or excuse me, or Texas A&M, who are two of the top rebounding teams in the country, and they out rebounded Arkansas by 12. Kudos to Arkansas for not getting out rebounded in the second half, because they were getting out rebounded by 12 going into halftime. Just, the same issues keep cropping up, and I think God, I want to get to maybe me not feeling so bad for Eric Musselman in a second, but I do feel bad for Muss. I mean, he comes in saying the same things to us, and it's obvious he's saying the same things to his players, but he's trying to get the message across through us, through his players, through, what he's screaming out on the court during practice and games. And it's clearly that message is not going through, because I mean, rebounding is the one thing really, it's all about effort. And it just was not there for a majority of that South Carolina game. Um, do you get the sense maybe that like some of the guys are starting to lose a little bit of belief in this team? I mean, I don't, weirdly, because every time we get one of them in a press conference after a loss, I think there's a lot of surprise in their voices and their answers. So I think they are expecting to turn it around, but it doesn't really match up with the effort and the play that they're showing right now.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I don't know. I can't really explain it because I mean, just there's the defensive lapses too that are killing me. I mean, you mentioned the rebounding that obviously as well, but like there's just times where you're like, man, that guy just got to the basket almost at will or with very little resistance. I'm like, what are they doing? Like, you feel like these guys are all extremely athletic. A lot of them are really long, just really guys that should be a lot better defenders, and we're not seeing it. And I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's a mental thing or if it's a psychological, like a thing where like they get down early and they just have no the mental fortitude to fight back and try to dig out of that hole. I'm not sure what it is, but it's just things that they should be doing, that you thought they were going to be able to do coming into the season. They're just incapable of doing, and that's not even addressing any of the offensive issues and being able to shoot the ball and be able to. I think the first two possessions of the game the other day were just incredibly frustrating because they just didn't do anything until like the last few seconds of the shot clock. They threw up a prayer. It's just so that's not even aside from all that, just effort stuff. It's just not there, and I don't know what's going on there because I mean, as you said, I mean Jeremiah Davenport after the game the other day was, very just he just was at a loss of words. Like it didn't feel like a guy that had quit, and so I don't know what's going on. I really don't. It's the weirdest thing in the world. This is a team that should be better than what it is, and it has not gone that way.
I will say, as far as the rebounding front goes, and one thing if you were going to ask me, like, what is maybe a huge flaw with this roster construction, with who Musselman brought in through the portal, is they're missing a three with Hugh. Like, they're missing a big guard, and I think Musselman's kind of alluded to that a little bit this season. But when they play Ellis Davis, or when they play Ellis Devo and Tremont Mark, that's not a lot of size in the backcourt. And then you put on top of that that like, yeah, TB is 6'11", but he's not the most physical 6'11" guy. There's clearly within this team a lack of physicality, and I guess like that's something that Musselman is trying to get out of them in the rebounding department, and like asking for more toughness, both mentally and physically. But at some point, like they can be as tough as they want. But I mean, South Carolina was like the BJ Matt kid. It was just jarring at times how much stronger he was than anyone on the roster. And he was the South Carolina four. They were playing him next to a five that was even bigger and stronger. So I think if we're gonna put aside maybe effort and some like things that are unexplainable, I do think one issue that this team has is just an overall, not even a lack of height, but a lack of strength, both at the guard spots and inside. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree with that, and I'll even single out. I'm sure we'll talk about Brazil here in a minute, but like even Makai Mitchell, like he has been massively disappointing to me because last year he was a serviceable, even maybe like solid college basketball player. Like I mean, he wasn't gonna go to the NBA or anything like that, but I mean, he was a solid player who played his role. He could go rebound. He could be a physical presence inside. And this year, he's just been almost non-existent. I mean, that you put him in for a minute or two, and he just he's either turning it over or can't get a rebound or just is not anything like he's like a shell of himself. And I don't know what the issue is. I don't know if it's because his brother's no longer with him. Mikel transferred to Little Rock. Uh, First time they haven't played together, so I mean I don't know if there's something there, like if they've got this twin energy that they've got to be together to be at their peak powers. But he just has not been the guy that you expected him to be. And he was a starter last year. He played a lot of minutes, and that was a team that made the Sweet 16. So I don't know, with him, and you throw in the TBs underperforming, that I think is maybe goes into that toughness factor. And then you also got Devo Davis. You would expect to be maybe one of your tougher guys just because he's been around for a while, and he's not the biggest guy in the world, but he is a guy that is fearless. But sometimes it goes a little too far. We saw him get ejected the other day. Whether or not that was warranted or not is debatable, but he's had other issues with technicals and things like that. And he just is not quite locked in mentally, and he's very, very up and down this year. And so it's I think all those factors kind of go into what you're talking about, the lack of toughness on the court. Maybe L. Ellis and those guys maybe don't quite have the physicality that you really need to be competitive in the SEC, and they have not been competitive at all.
I wonder with Mackay, one thing that just comes to my mind, and I don't know, I wasn't around last year, but I wonder if Jordan Walsh maybe covered up some of those flaws that we're now seeing this year, just playing next to him in the front court, that versatile defender, excellent rebounder, physical big guy, pretty good partner to have in the front court. And now with, I mean, you said it. I think it was starting to get said a lot by fans and, us and the media. It's been a disappointing season for Trevin Brazile. I think he's the NBA draft prospect. He's shown in flashes just how, great he can be, but it just hasn't been consistent at all. And I think the most disappointing part of it all is if they do they're using him as a stretch for really a floor spacer and a pure shooter, which is great for your four to be that, but he has not been good enough shooting the basketball for that to be his primary role. He's shooting 35% from three on the season, but those numbers have gone way down over the past couple of weeks. I mean, at one point, I think not too long ago, maybe before the SEC play started, he was above 40% from three, because I remember him, Mark, and Battle were all above 40%, and thinking, why is this team not a better 3-point shooting team overall? Funny how the numbers kind of always have a way of working themselves back out eventually. Hutch, what did you make of the rotation on Saturday? I asked Muss a question about it, and I don't think he particularly liked my question about if he thought that the players maybe were struggling to adapt with all the changes in the rotation. And I understand why he doesn't like it. I mean, nothing's working, right? So he's tinkering, he's the mad scientist, he's trying, desperately trying different things, and I understand that. But you just beat Texas A&M, and I felt like there was a little too much panic early on in that South Carolina game instead of maybe letting that same rotation, that same group of guys that won you the Texas A&M game, try and get them back. What did you make of the rotation Saturday? And are you sensing maybe it's kind of caught up with Musselman just how many guys he's used at the beginning of the year?
Yeah, I think one reason Musk reacted the way he did to your question, I kind of laughed whenever it happened, was because before you've been here, that was always the thing people would ask was like, why don't you play more people? Like, you're only playing 7 dudes. And he's always just like, well, these are the 7 guys. And so it's just kind of like a role reversal. He's like, well, now I'm playing guys and people are asking me about that. So I think that had a little bit to do with it. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like Musselman was smart enough to recognize, maybe you say there's panic. I think he may realize like, yeah, this ain't working, and I think he recognized that, and he was trying to find something that did work. 'Cause, I mean, as we talked about it in the last podcast, like the rotation, the 7 or 8 guys that are going to play, I think are going to change from game to game, week by week. And so he's trying to figure out, okay, who are my 7 guys? Now, it was a little jarring to see them play 12 different guys. I mean, Denaje Harris got in the game, and how many fans even know that he's on the team and a scholarship player? So that tells you, like, they were desperately trying to search for something. Eric Musselman called 2 timeouts in a 29-second span. That is just jarring because he is a guy that never calls timeouts. That's another thing that fans have criticized him over the years. Like, why don't you ever call more timeouts? And well, there he goes. He's calling 2 in 29 seconds. I think that all combines tells you just how much of a he recognized that this was not going well, and he was trying to find answers. And so I don't necessarily fault him for it, as much, because I would be a little bit worried because I think no matter what they did, they were going to lose by double digits. It just that's the way it was going. I don't know if they had stuck to what they did against Texas A&M, it really would have helped much. Because it's also think back to the A&M game, they were really only good for about half of that game. I mean, you look at the first half, and even the end of the first half, they kind of started letting it slip. I think it shrunk from like a 20-point lead to a 13 or 14-point lead at halftime. Over the last few minutes, they've been terrible closing the end of first halves. That's another topic for another day. And so, yeah, I don't know if sticking with that rotation necessarily would have fixed anything, just because it's that result was unavoidable, unfortunately, based on everything I've seen so far this year.
Yeah, I think that's a good point that it might not have mattered at the end of the day. It's hard for me to think that we have reached like the final weeks of January, right? I mean, there's a lot of SEC basketball games left, but the season's more than halfway over now. And I mean, Musselman told us in after the Texas A&M game, he's like, I have no idea who's going to play night to night. And while that could be a good thing if you're winning, if you're losing, I don't. That's not a good thing. And I'm not saying he needs to change things. I'm not suggesting that if he. I'm not suggesting that if he did change things, we would have an automatic magical turnaround. He obviously knows more about this team than either of us do. But I think that until they do kind of lock down on a rotation that they trust, these inconsistencies are going to continue to pop up game to game. It's just inevitable. The two biggest question marks I do have is Keon Menefield and Khalif and Battle. I mean, they struggled so badly to score points against South Carolina, and those guys combined for 5 minutes. I mean, or excuse me, they combined for 7 minutes. I mean, what did Menefield do that was so wrong that he only got 2 minutes against South Carolina? I don't know. And neither of those guys are great defenders. So maybe if those guys play, you score more points, but you give up more points. And of course, Musselman's a defensive guy, so he'll take the defense. I don't know. It's a very difficult situation that Arkansas finds themselves in. I mean, what changes do you think he should make or Arkansas should make? I mean, are there any things that you would like to see from this team moving forward?
I think this is something maybe you mentioned to me back earlier in the season when these issues first started cropping up. And I thought there's no way Musselman would ever do this because, as you said, he is a defensive minded guy. But maybe at some point he just has to say F it and go with as much offensive firepower as he can. And because I mean, you mentioned Minifield and Battle aren't necessarily the best defenders, but newsflash, neither are the guys that have been playing. They've been really, really bad. I mean, they've been letting opponents do pretty much whatever they want, whether it be shoot 50% from three or get to the rim or get into the paint at will. It's all been bad. So, I mean, could it really hurt that much? I mean, to put those guys in there, I mean, maybe you score some more points and the defensive performance really is about the same. I mean, who knows? So, I mean, maybe that's what they do. Again, I would still be shocked if Musselman does that because it would go against everything he's ever done. But we have seen Musselman play a zone defense this year, which I never thought I would see. And I never thought I'd see him call 2 timeouts in a 29-second span. And we've seen that this year. So maybe he does it. But that to me, that's really the only. I mean, what else could they do at this point?
Nothing much. I mean, I think they tried pretty much everything that either of us could suggest. The one thing I would like to see more on a night to night basis is playing through Brazil. I don't know, he's not the guy that you're going to throw it to him in the post and like let him post up and do a hook shot. But I mean, I was sitting there, and if you were sitting next to me, Hutch, you might have seen some hairs falling out next to you, just like hands in my head, just exasperated with when Trevin and any of the five men were on the floor together. So like Mackay, Jalen Graham, or Chandler Lawson, the refusal to use Trevin as the screener. It was always the five man as the screener. And TB would come up and like maybe fake like he was going to screen, and then he would slip or go to the 3-point line. I think they need to utilize him more just in every aspect of the offense and see what happens. Because right now he's just like for the most part he's standing behind the 3-point line, wanting to be a catch and shoot guy, and we know he can be more than that. We've seen him drive, we've seen the high flying dunks, we've seen him be a good pick and pop guy. I think that's there's a million things that probably need to be changed. I don't know if this is a magical fix, but for his talent and for what this team needs, which is maybe just a little bit more spacing. I mean, if you get his man in a pick and pop, what is the defender going to do? I guess with how he's shooting the ball recently, they can kind of sag off of him. But hey, maybe he can create enough open shots if he's involved in the offense enough. Are you concerned about Trevin's future at all right now as a draft prospect? Is this just a lull, worrisome in college basketball, and he's still going to get drafted high? I mean, what do you not only at Arkansas, but what are you kind of making of his future in basketball right now, based off what he's done this season?
Yeah, I'm not going to pretend to really follow the NBA draft maybe as closely as I do, MLB and NFL. But I do know that even as recently as earlier this month, I feel like he was still being talked about as a potential first round draft pick, which is mind blowing. But I do know that the NBA draft is based more on potential, maybe more so than the other two sports. And this is one of those deals where I mean, we saw it last year. Everyone's like, well, how is Nick Smith going to get drafted? He hardly played. He was always hurt, and he stunk when he played. I'm like, well, he's still an elite level player, and he fell quite a bit in the draft, but still got drafted in the first round. And so, I mean, I still think he's going to get drafted, which is just that's the thing. Is like you're suggesting, hey, maybe they should utilize him better. Yeah, I mean, let's use the first round draft pick. I mean, you probably only got one NBA draft pick on the team right now. Let's see what they can do with him. So I mean, I don't know what his future holds. I do know I think part of it, you mentioned utilizing him better, maybe schematically, things like that. I also think he's got to flip a switch mentally and turn on that killer instinct. And I just don't know if we see it, I don't know if he needs to go posterize somebody and that'll get him going, or maybe someone. I think there was a game earlier in the year where he kind of got in a little tangle with an opponent, and then he really kind of flipped the switch and started driving really hard and attacking the basket and looked really good. Uh, Maybe something like that has to happen because he just hasn't shown it yet. It almost reminds me of a couple of years ago. I remember thinking Moses Moody was just this incredible player, but he didn't have that same killer mindset that, say, maybe a Mason Jones or a JD Note had. I mean, if he had the same mindset as those two dudes, Moses Moody would average 30 points a game in college, I feel like. And some guys just don't have that, but he still was able to be effective and be the leading scorer and be a first round, lottery pick. Just because, he had the ball in his hands quite a bit, just the position difference between him and Brazil. But I do think if he could just figure out a way to turn that on, that would help a little bit. But I don't know if his confidence is right there. I don't know if his confidence is shaken. I don't know if it's the knee injury. I feel like he's pretty much put that behind him. At least we thought so earlier in the year. Maybe it's a thing where maybe they're losing and he's just kind of bummed out about all that and it's not going the way he's expected. I don't know what's going on, but I would like to see him flip a switch and be effective. I would like to see the Trevor in Brazil we all expected to see, these last 13 conference games, however many it is now, because he's a fun player to watch when he's going good, and I still think he's heading to the NBA after this year.
I agree, and I think I may have been pretty much criticizing Musselman a lot on this podcast, and I just want to say that I haven't left an Arkansas game this season thinking, "Oh wow, they got out coached." It's there's a lot of I think the primary issues with this team are just they're player related, and but they're, like I said about the big three and the size. I think there are some just overall flaws to the way the roster has been constructed. But this is kind of the avenue. This is the strategy that Musselman has most years, I feel like, is accumulate all this talent, piece it together, and figure it out. And he's done that for the most part, right? There's always the risk that it doesn't quite work out one year, and it feels like this year that's happening. Still some time left. I think both of us are feeling pretty pessimistic at the moment about it. One last thing I'll say about the South Carolina game and something potentially moving forward is I said they need to play through Trevin Brazil more. If they don't, this is Tremont Mark's offense. It was kind of ridiculous, I feel like, in the first half of the South Carolina game at one point. I think we had reached the 10-minute mark maybe, and he only had 2 shot attempts. After scoring 35, the game winner against Texas A&M, he's got to be the focal point of the offense, and that when the clock does get down to like 5 seconds at the end of the shot clock, the ball's in his hands, right? It's not in Ellis's or Battles or Devontae's. It's in his hands. I think that when things start getting tough, as they did in the second half, and they went to him and they produced a little rally before South Carolina blew the doors off. But this is Tremont Mark's team, and if you're not gonna, if Trevin Brazil isn't capable of taking that next step, then hey, give it to your best, probably toughest player, and hope that he can kind of grind you out of this offensive lull that you're experiencing right now.
Yeah, and I think I will give Arkansas cut them a little bit of slack on the whole Tremont Mark 2 shot attempts in the first, it was almost like the first 15 minutes, because early on I really noticed they were playing some really, really good defense on Tremont Mark. I mean, he wasn't getting much space at all, and I cannot remember the guy's name. Cooper, I want to say, number 55 for South Carolina. He was playing particularly good defense, and that's why I asked Musselman after the game, what led to a slow start. I had my opinion being it was the defense, and I was pleasantly pleased whenever he was like, man, that guy is a tremendous defender, and he called him the best individual defender that he's seen this year. I mean, the comments he made me think like, man, I don't know if this guy's got any eligibility left, but if he hits the portal after this season, might go after him, because every once in a while he'll have comments like that. But I think a lot of that had to do with that. But yeah, they did change some things up in the second half. Musselman talked about that, and T Mark was able to get going, and hit those two, as I said earlier, back-to-back threes that were big. Felt like it got Arkansas briefly back into the game, but there's always so much one man can do. But yeah, it was good to see him get going because he did score 35 points, hit the game winner a few days earlier, so it was a little bit jarring to see him struggle so much early on.
Yeah, and you're right. He put there was excellent defense being played at Talon Cooper. I think that's if pronouncing his first name right. But look, Ellis and Devonte Davis combined to go 6 for 22 from the field. Tremont Mark went 6 for 13, so they made the same amount of shots and 9 fewer attempts. Ellis and Devo compared to Mark. I think they're just when teams are gonna start doing that now. Like, this isn't gonna be only a South Carolina thing. I think other SEC teams are gonna say, if we cut off the head of the snake, which is Tremont Mark, we're gonna beat Arkansas. So the muscle men, the players on the floor, they have to start being persistent and getting creative ways to get him the ball. And even if he's going up against a great defender, he's probably their best offensive option right now, just because everyone else is so inconsistent. And quite frankly, like you said, I think a lot of guys are lacking confidence on this team right now. There's not a lot to go around. One positive I will say is I've been impressed with Jeremiah Davenport the past couple games. I think he is playing with confidence. He's not playing amazing by any stretch, but he's starting to make some shots. He's really fighting on the boards, and he's starting to, I think, settle and know what his role is, which is provide that offensive punch every once in a while and just provide effort on the defensive end. That's all you can do right now. Anyways, I guess that will wrap up South Carolina talk. But Hutch, College Game Day's coming to Fayetteville, first time ever in Bud Walton Arena. I'm just going to jump to my What the Hog segment now because it relates to this. Every week I do a segment called What the Hog, where an outsider, analyze or at least just look at some ridiculous thing I've seen on social media over the past week from Arkansas Twitter, Arkansas X, Instagram, whatever. This week's What the Hog is, what I don't understand the displeasure with College Game Day coming to Bud Walton Arena. I think there was a lot of excitement when it was first announced, and then Arkansas lost to South Carolina, and everyone was like, "Oh God." But hey, it's College Game Day, man. This is a moment to celebrate. You never know whose eyes are going to be watching. If by some miracle Arkansas beats Kentucky and has a great environment, you never know what recruit that might affect. Yes, I know that's unlikely, but hey, Arkansas beat Duke this year. They beat Purdue at home. I think they can pull off a stunner and beat Kentucky. What the hog? Why are we not excited about College Game Day, Hutch?
This time I'm going to actually take the side of the fans on this one. I totally understand where they're coming from, because it's like they've been so good these last 3 years. They've had other opportunities. They've had number one Auburn come to town. They've had Kentucky come to town. There were all these great opportunities for College Game Day to come. They've had previous really good teams. Even in the Mike Anderson era, there were some good teams, and they could have come, and they never did. And I think it even bleeds over from the football side of things. I mean, they haven't been to Arkansas. They've been to every other SEC team, even Vanderbilt, since they last came to Arkansas. They last came to Arkansas in 2006. Darren McFadden was on that team. That tells you how long ago that was. And there's been other times where they could have come. I mean, they should have come in 2010 when Alabama was in town. That's another debate for another day. And so, I mean, there's some frustration there, and I think it's bled over into this decision. Like, oh, of course they're going to come now. They want to showcase Arkansas, get their asses kicked on, by Kentucky. And so, yeah, I can get that frustration. But I will say, like you, I would not be totally stunned if they beat Kentucky. I've already accepted the fact that they're probably going to beat Kentucky. They're going to beat Tennessee. And the Final Four this year is going to be Kentucky, Tennessee, Duke, and Purdue. That's just going to be the most Arkansas thing ever. So I put it on record right now, January 21st, 2024. I've made that Final Four prediction. And if it happens, it would be the funniest thing in the world. That would be very, very, very Arkansas. So I get the frustration from the fan base on that one.
Well, only teams that Arkansas beats. So if Kentucky beats Arkansas, then they're eliminated from the Final Four discussion. Okay. All right. I rest my case. I'm not going to argue back with you. I don't have the scar tissue built up of a lifetime of being snubbed by ESPN and College Game Day, but I'm excited. I don't know what we'll do coverage wise. Any of us. I don't know like if we'll be invited to cover it. I'm sure there'll be something going on, but I've never been to a College Game Day, football, basketball, or anything like that. I tried very desperately to get my dad to a College Game Day for the Miami Hurricanes back in 2000, I think a Virginia Tech game, and he refused. He absolutely refused. Said he'd rather stay home and watch it on TV. So, Dad, this College Game Day this week is for you when I go. So, uh, anyways, let's move off basketball season just for a quick second. Not really too much else to discuss in Arkansas sports. The women's basketball team got blown out by LSU earlier today, but they're still right there in contention for an NCAA tournament bid. We might start talking about them a little bit more as the season goes on. I think they were the last team in on ESPN's bracketology that was released 3 days ago or so. The football team started winter workouts this week. Looks like there were some running through the snow involved. That sounds miserable to me. But I think the big news, Hutch, and I'm really excited to kind of get your opinion on this. Multiple reports about Hunter Dietz, the left-handed freshman, is going to miss the beginning of the season. I think D1 baseball might have been the first people to report that he had a minor procedure after fall ball. What does this mean for Arkansas? You kind of are the baseball guy right now between the two of us, at least. Probably the football and basketball guy too. But what does this mean for Arkansas baseball? Is this a big problem? I see a lot of fans kind of complaining about just the injury history that Arkansas has had, but specifically for this team, what does Hunter's injury mean?
Yeah, there's a lot of scar tissue there as well because Arkansas has the last 2 seasons lost their projected ace right before the season started. Jackson Wiggins last year, Peyton Paulette the year before that. This one isn't quite to that level. Hunter Dietz is a stud freshman. Don't get me wrong; he's one of the highest rated pitchers Arkansas. I think he may be the highest rated pitcher on perfect game Arkansas has gotten to campus. I want to say maybe in 9 years, close to a decade, something like that. So I mean, it's you don't usually get a guy this talented to campus. Usually they get drafted out of high school and signed. So getting him in the first place was a big deal, and he did look really electric over in the fall. There were a couple of outings where I'm like, man, this dude is just incredible. I mean, I was thinking maybe this guy could be the closer, something like that. I mean, just he's really really talented. Maybe he could be a midweek starter. So I mean, that's kind of what you're losing, but you've got other pieces. I mean, he's not even the only freshman that I thought was going to contribute. I mean, Gabe Gackle is another guy. They've got a couple other guys. You never know with freshmen; it's always hit and miss. I mean, Gage Wood last year was a perfect example. He's a guy that we thought maybe he would contribute, possibly, and then by the middle of the season, he's your closer in SEC play. And so it's hard to say with freshmen, but they've got so many talented freshmen that there's bound to be 2 or 3 of them that contribute, and that's on top of everybody coming back. I mean, you've got an incredible starting rotation, assuming they all stay healthy, in Hagen Smith, Brady Tygart, Mason Molina, which I've written about all 3 of those guys on Best of Arkansas Sports. People should go check those out. And then you've got Will McIntyre out of the bullpen. He could be your kind of Swiss Army knife, a guy that goes multiple times a weekend. You've got Gage Wood back. You've got Ben Bybee and Parker Coyle. You got Christian Fouch. You've got, I mean, just so many guys, and I'm probably forgetting people. There's so many on this pitching staff. So they've got the depth to overcome an injury, especially if he's a guy that's going to eventually return and be in the mix at some point later on in the season. So it's not the end of the world. It is a significant loss because he is such a talented arm. But I do think that they're going to be okay.
Okay, I think it'll be interesting. The thing that I'm really most looking forward to, and not that this particularly matters a great deal in college baseball, but is who takes over as the midweek starters for them, and are those guys that are can they eat innings? I think that's one of my biggest questions for this season because there's so, like you mentioned, the weekend rotation, so much top line talent there. It seems like there's a couple guys that are going to come out of the bullpen that we have confidence in, like Gage Wood and Ben Bybee. maybe Ben is a midweek starter, but if they can find some midweek guys that can eat innings as a starter and not put too much strain on the bullpen, that way the bullpen can, be a complementing piece to that weekend rotation, and you don't, it's all connected, right? They're all different pieces of the puzzle, but you don't want to have Hagen Smith out there feeling like he has to throw 7, 8 innings every Friday night. I'm sure he's completely capable of doing that, but when you can take that pressure off of him where you've got a fresh bullpen going into the weekend, I think that makes such a big deal in college baseball. So uh, if Dietz was potentially going to be a midweek starter, I could see that hurting them a little bit. But it sounds like from everything that I've heard from you and reading about this team and what DVH has said, they'll be okay, especially early on, just with the amount of depth that they have in that pitching rotation. Uh, who are some guys, maybe just real quick, Hutch, that vying for a midweek starters position? I mean, do you think that there's any front runners right now to be that first Tuesday or Wednesday game is toeing the rubber?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, Ben Bybee and Parker Coyle are probably the two guys that, based on my conversation with Matt Hobbs, the pitching coach, after fall ball, and then based on what Dave Van Horn said the last time we talked to him, those two guys kind of, Ben Bybee has been the first guy out of their mouth, essentially. He's a guy that had a really, really good summer in the California League, and I think they won the summer ball World Series thing that's up in Wichita. I can't remember what it's called, National Baseball Congress or something like that. But I mean, he put up incredible numbers, had a sub 2 ERA. You got to consider the competition there a little bit, but he's a guy that I think could slot in. But Parker Coyle as well, he had a really good summer up in the Cape Cod League, which everyone knows is the top of the line summer league. So I think those are the top two guys I would say. I mean, maybe those freshmen, Dietz later in the year, and then Gabe Gackle, someone like that, they could get a shot. We'll find out soon, really soon, because they opened the season with a 4-game series. So we're gonna figure out who that fourth guy is right out of the gate, which is kind of nice.
And they don't have a midweek series, right? After that, that first week there's no midweek. They just go straight to Dallas. Is that right?
I believe that's accurate. Yeah, I think that's maybe why they did the 4-game series. Was just go and get that fourth game before having to go to the Arlington event with Michigan, Oregon State, and Oklahoma State, I believe.
Really, really good schedule. I like the way that it's gotten. They don't play double midweek games until. Sorry, I'm pulled it up here, but oh man, they might never play a double midweek game. Maybe that's until Texas Tech in April. Really, is the first time they play two midweek games. Dang, I gotta get used to that. My UNCW Seahawks loved a good 2-game series in the midweek. So,
They
anyways,
usually have
enough of
some.
enough. They've got a couple, but I don't. Unless I'm reading the schedule wrong, it's pretty much just Texas Tech and yeah. I don't know. And everybody listening to
What?
this, you can go Google the schedule and be confused with me as well. So,
That's
all
good. I
right, I
mean,
think that
that's a lot better than having double Grambling State midweek series. I mean, that's not as necessarily super fun. Doesn't hurt. It doesn't help the RPI either.
true. Awesome. Well, I think that's all for tonight's episode, Hutch. I think that's it from me at least. Anything on the tip of your lips that you want to talk about with Arkansas sports, or should we call that an episode?
I'll throw in one football tidbit because I don't know if we may have forgotten, but I can't remember when this all happened in relation to the last episode. But we did finalize all the last super seniors for the football team. Hudson Clark is back. Brady Latham is gone. Those are probably the two most notable moves. I know the Hudson Clark thing is a very hot button topic among Arkansas fans. Some people think he is the worst football player to ever wear cleats, but I'm here to tell you that he is a serviceable, good, solid football player. Probably not an NFL draft pick, but you want him on your team for another year, if nothing else, to add depth. He is a versatile piece. He's not as bad as maybe some fans think he is, but that's another debate for another day. And then we also found out that Quincy McAdoo, per sources, is going to have to take a medical hardship. I know Quincy has come out and refuted that report, but I stand by my source on that one that I believe his time at the Razorbacks unfortunately is over. Very disappointed because he was such a talented player.
Yeah, I'm not going to talk about Hudson Clark because we are going to probably talk about him a lot next year. So why stress about it right now, given there's a whole basketball season to stress about, or a whole half of a basketball season to stress about. So Hudson Clark talk can wait till spring ball at least. We can give it another couple months on my end. But yes, good call, bringing back both of those up just to wrap things up. So yeah, another fun episode. I'll start this one. You can find me on Twitter at JacksonFuller16 and read all my stuff on swtimes.com. Just as a friendly reminder, I cover Arkansas for the Fort Smith Southwest Times Record and the USA Today Network. Really appreciate everybody listening and happy to team up with Hutch for this podcast. Hutch, tell people where they can find you and read your work.
Yeah, so I'm at NWA Hutch on Twitter/X. You can find everything on there. And then you can also find all my work at bestofarkansassports.com. Cover everything. We're an independent site, so that's kind of nice. I get to do fun things like this with people like Jackson and talk about all things Hogs. But we do cover football, basketball, baseball over there, so you can go check it out at bestofarkansassports.com.
Awesome. And we will be back with another episode next Monday. We got 2 big games we'll be recapping, Ole Miss and Kentucky, along with whatever news comes out of the baseball or football team front. And hey, maybe some women's basketball as well. I am hoping that they might put together a little run here towards the end of the SEC. We'll see. Awesome, Hutch. Thank you so much for joining. Enjoy your Sunday night, and I will see you soon, man.